Okay, looks like we've settled. So welcome everyone. Very warm welcome to King's Business School virtually. It's a nice sunny day here in London for those of you that aren't in London. So we're very happy to see you all and welcome you all. My name's Kate Foreman. I'm our Head of Executive Programme Development, and I'm going to kind of MC for today and introduce you to Ali, who is our star speaker and is going to really share with you the substance of today's webinar. And I'm also going to just mention a couple of colleagues who are on here. Sarah Hayton, who, if you've taken a course with us before or are thinking of doing another, she's here, and you're likely to have a conversation with her at some point through application. And my other colleague, Grace Purdy, as well, who works with us on the courses. And again, you may have met already or may meet. So we're all very happy to welcome you, and we'll be on hand to answer questions and to follow up with you afterwards if there are any individual questions. So if we could go to the next slide, just wanted to give you today really a very brief introduction to our executive education offering at King's. And then the most exciting piece is Ali's going to kind of do a sort of taster session with us around emotional intelligence. And I think you will be really excited to hear what she has to say, and it will just give you a sense of kind of the stuff that we do at King's. And then just to finish up, I thought it might be useful to share with you a bit about how King's Business School can help support you with your professional development and the courses that we have on offer and different kinds of activities. So we'll be happy to answer questions on that as well. One thing we're going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind putting the questions into the Q&A box, you should be able to find that at the bottom, I believe. There's a sort of two speech bubbles called Q&A. So feel free to log your questions in there as we go along, and we've got a couple of moments where we'll pause and make sure we answer those. And in a moment as well, when Ali is kicked off, she may ask you just to use the chat box as well. And again, you find that at the bottom. But either way, if you pop it into one of those text boxes, we'll make sure we find that and make sure we answer for you. So just to give you a little bit of context around King's Business School, we are all about connecting people with possibilities. So we sit within King's College London, as you all know. That's no doubt how you found us, and the business school is a very big and important department within the college. And we're all about engaging with organisations, and we have quite a social mission. So we're very interested in creating value for society as a university. And so obviously within the business school, that's very much around how we can help people to do business and work within organisations and really, maximise your impact and your personal development as well. We are one of the largest management institutions in London, and we have a very strong research record at King's. I'm sure you're aware of that. We're Russell Group University. Consistently, we're ranked in the top 10 for business and management as a department as well. So really, really strong expertise, and we're very much into evidence-based, research-led learning. So everything that you learn with us will be from things that have been proven to work and will have an impact. And we think that's a really, really important piece of what we do and what we can share with you. So within executive education, more specifically, we offer a range of things. Probably what you can see most on our website is our short courses, and they at the moment are a lot offered virtually for very obvious reasons, but that will continue. And then we also have some in-person courses as well, and we're really looking forward to being able to welcome people back to campus later in the year. We are very friendly towards our alumni and other friends through King's Health Partners, so there are discounts available on courses as well. And we also, of course, do custom education. So if you or your organisation had a need where actually you felt that there might be something more bespoke we could do with you, we're very, very open to those conversations as well, of course. But today we're going to largely focus on our open enrolment offering, in particular the few courses we have around leadership and emotional intelligence for obvious reasons, but we can speak more about those later. And just to kind of situate executive education, I think most of you will definitely be familiar with this if you've come to this webinar, but it's our offering to people with some work experience. So the things that we'll be talking about today are really suitable if you have a few years of management experience and if you're wanting to really develop further. So a useful way to think about that is, perhaps you've been a kind of functional role for a few years and you're maybe now taking on more general management responsibilities. But just to say there that, you don't have to be a leader with a CEO title. Of course, what we do is appropriate for those people as well. But, you might lead a team or a project or something like that. And we really feel that all of what we can share with you is appropriate in those senses as well. So something I would say is if anything today piques your interest, please do contact us. We're always more than happy to have informal discussions with people about your professional ambitions and your skills. And how we can maybe support your learning in that area. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us after the session if that would be useful. So I think I'm going to hand over to Dr. Ali Budjanovcanin, if that's okay, Ali. I'll let you do your formal introduction, but I really hope you enjoy this segment and you'll learn a lot from her. I know she's fantastic. So enjoy.
Thank you very much, Kate. And hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Kate said, I'm Ali Budjanovcanin. I'm an academic at the business school, or sometimes at the business school, at the moment at home. And I'll basically give you a brief overview of who I am and how I sit within executive education. But then I'll just, as Kate said, give you a slight taster of some of the things that we do. So you're gonna have to bear with me a little bit with the technology, but as you can see from this slide, as I said, I'm a lecturer in work psychology, and in addition to some of the stuff that I do on the undergraduate and on the postgraduate work, I'm also the course director for a number of courses on the executive education offering. And so two of them are here, the Leadership and People Management Programme, which I'll just touch on slightly, and then the Emotional Intelligence for Leadership Programme. So one of my areas of research and teaching is in leadership, and so it's the expertise that I have in that I'm bringing to these two courses. The Leadership and People Management Programme, as I say, I'll mention just a bit, but Kate will also mention a bit later. That's one of our more popular courses, which is really aimed at people who are kind of mid-career. And just to give you an overview of how come we're doing now an Emotional Intelligence for Leadership course, our leadership and people management course is very much geared towards somebody who's mid-career and wants to better understand themselves as a leader, have exposure to lots of cutting edge research in the area of leadership, and really build their confidence and their leadership journey. As part of that, we cover a whole host of different topics, everything from having authority as a leader, politics in the workplace, things like systems thinking. And through that, one of the topics that we touch on in a very sort of brief way is emotional intelligence. And as we've been doing, the course over a number of years, we've realized that people are really interested in emotional intelligence and can see its value for leadership. And so that's where this new course was born that we'll be running in March. And so what I'll do is just move on from there, just to sort of start off the kind of the taster session, if you like. And this is where, again, as I say, bear with me, but I'd ask you to pull up your chat function and answer the question for me. I'm going to give you a question and you can give me your responses in the chat box. So when I say emotions in the workplace, what does that make you think of? What does that conjure up in your minds? Throw some examples into the chat. Oh, I think some's coming through on, is that the Q&A? Vulnerability. What else? Emotions in the workplace. What does it make you think of? Fiery personalities, okay. What we tend to see with this question, or what I tend to see when I ask this question, is that people often associate emotions in the workplace with a negative thing. So they see it as something that doesn't belong in the workplace. And that's where I've given you this idea of the myth of rationality, as I've put on the slide there. So for a very long time, scholars like myself and like people I work with who are studying organizations and who are studying the people within them have often associated emotions with something that shouldn't be in the workplace. They think that if you're going to be running a kind of an efficient and a well-functioning organization, that it should be devoid of emotion. But the reality is that organizations, and more specifically the people that comprise them, are obviously inescapably about emotions. And so if we think about this at a very basic level, if you think about yourself and your kind of rationale for going to work, what are your goals for going to work? And you've got a set of goals. And then you think about the organization and the goals that the organization has for being at work. Often those two things can be in tension, not always, but often they are. So it might be that you as an individual think, I'm going to work and I see this as a stepping stone, this job, for something else. Whereas the organization wants somebody who they can sort of rely on for the long term. It could be that you as an individual, you go to work and you think, actually, I've been here 3 years now, I deserve a promotion, I work really hard. But the organization doesn't necessarily agree with that for whatever reason, whether it's cost concerns or just sees things differently. And so what you start to see is that the workplace can actually be quite an emotion-laden place. And that's, for countless reasons beyond the ones I've just given, and, not least because you're having to interact with other humans on a day-to-day basis. So the fact is that we cannot separate ourselves from our emotions. And this is where we want to try and dispel that myth that the organization should be devoid of emotions. So what I want to suggest in this very short time that we've got to just cover this is that actually what we can do is use emotions as a tool for leaders. As I said, it's the essence of what makes us human. But beyond that, if we can understand how to use them and actually leverage them, then they can become a tool to actually try and achieve some of the things that we're trying to achieve. And we know from research by people who are far more intelligent than I, around looking at how we actually think and the processes we go through when we think, using all of these kinds of mapping technologies and techniques, that actually the way that our thought processes go through our brains is via our emotional center, what's called the limbic system. And so when we're actually thinking, when we're actually converting stimulus into action, it does go via that emotional center. And so we know that emotions are critical to thinking. And that's for good and for bad. So we know from a kind of negative perspective that actually that the emotions can be potentially quite hindering on some of our thought processes. They can cloud our judgment. There's a lot of work that's been done by a woman called Francesca Gino. She's a Harvard professor that looks at how it affects our judgment and how it can affect our decision making. But the flip side of that, as I've said, is if we can understand emotions to be data, just like financial data is, just like our customer feedback is, then actually we can start to think about emotions in a very different way. And so when you start to look at emotions as data, it changes not just how you kind of feel about them in the workplace, but also what you do with them, ultimately kind of letting you channel and change your behaviors in response to various situations and challenges. And so if we think about emotions as variables that we can actually control, then that gives us a much better grounding in thinking of them as a tool for leaders. And this is where emotional intelligence comes in. It's the set of skills that we can use to start doing this and using it as a tool. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? What do I mean by that? So one of the definitions that's used is that it's kind of a set of skills, emotional and social skills and abilities that really allow us to navigate the ups and downs of life, the challenges. And it's about how well are you able to cope with some of those challenges in a useful way. And so it affects our behavior, it affects our ability to navigate social complexities. And I'm sure if you think about people that you know, everybody's got one of these friends who just seems to have everything together. And even when things are being thrown at them, they very much feel, you can see that they can just cope with things. They're the ones who make life look quite easy, even in the midst of challenge. And so I don't probably need to tell you that those are the people who are likely to be high in emotional intelligence. So just to give you a little bit more, it's not personality. So it's not those traits that we have, and we often understand personality according to 5 dimensions. It's not those. Personality tends to be static and strategic, so it stays stable over time and it operates over the long term. So we don't change our personality too much. Whereas emotional intelligence is what we call dynamic and static. So it's something that we can really engage differently. We can bring different dimensions of emotional intelligence to bear depending on a situation and what's warranted in that situation. It's also not IQ. So when we think of intelligence, we often think of IQ as the first thing. We think about cognitive ability, we think about verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, all of those things that you would associate with IQ. But what we know again from the research is that when you look at IQ and you put it next to EQ, we actually know there's not much of a correlation between the two. So you could be that person, and again, I'm sure we all know, if not ourselves, other people like this who have a really high IQ, but when it comes to emotional intelligence, perhaps not so much. And so the two things are not similar in that sense. And so one of the things you might want to think about in sort of wondering whether or not a course in emotional intelligence is for you is to think about what are some of the signs. I mean, we can all develop our emotional intelligence. And the really, I guess the real positive out of this is that whereas IQ peaks when we're in our sort of late teens and early sort of adulthood, we know that EQ, emotional intelligence, peaks somewhere in our 40s. And then apparently there's another peak, according to research that's coming out now. And so this is really encouraging in thinking that actually we can develop our emotional intelligence quite far into our lives. And so if you're thinking about whether or not emotional intelligence training is for you, one of the things I would encourage you to think about is, are there signs that perhaps you could be developing your emotional intelligence further? So are you the kind of person, for example, that feels they always have to be right and you can't get past that sometimes in your interactions with other people? Are you, or do you, and we all do this, sometimes get home from work and you kind of reflect on the day and you think, oh man, I wish I'd handled that interaction differently. You kind of regret the way that something has played out in an interaction with you and a colleague. Do you blame other people for things that go wrong that, perhaps maybe are your own fault? Or, for example, do you sometimes find that you just don't cope very well with stress? Do you crumble under stress? Things like this are all indicators that perhaps actually I got space to develop some of my emotional intelligence, and they might be signs that you could do with just tweaking a little bit. But a really good way to think of emotional intelligence is, to what extent am I in charge of my emotions versus to what extent do I let my emotions be in charge of me? And that's a kind of really, I think, useful way of trying to understand whether or not we feel we need development in this area. So the title of this session is Emotional Intelligence in Times of Crisis. So I want to just touch on that a little bit. As I mentioned a moment ago, obviously emotional intelligence really helps us navigate some of the ups and downs in life, some of the challenges. And that's not to say we don't need it during normal times, but what we do know is that we need it even more when stress kicks in, when things are really challenging. And I don't think I need to say it, but in the last year, this has been the case for most people. We face stressors from every single angle, and in some cases with very little social support. And so this is really a recipe for disaster, because anyway, we often in normal times can struggle to interact with people in a way that's useful. If you're a leader and you need to influence people to get things done, you can often find yourself struggling with that. So that's one of the reasons that it's really important to start thinking about it during times of crisis. So I think a useful way to think about ourselves is, and this is a Harvard Business Review article that's just come out by Schwartz and Pines. They talk about and helpfully outline the different kinds of self that we can inhabit. And they've outlined 3 different selves. They talk about the overwhelmed self, the adult self, and the survival self. And they say during times of crisis, like the pandemic, like when you're facing a deadline and your team, are not perhaps pulling in the right direction, like when something's going on for you at home and you're trying to sort of work, effectively. During those times of crisis, what we tend to do is inhabit one of these selves. And so they talk about the overwhelmed self as the first one. And this is where, as an individual, you feel a little bit uncentered, a little bit discombobulated, and you might feel, very defenseless. You might feel very vulnerable and childlike, and scared. The other self that they talk about, which often comes to the fore, and you might recognize this in yourself, is the survival self. And this is where, in response again to crisis or in response to stressful periods, you go into full panic mode. And I think, again, if we think back to March last year, probably some of us were very much in that space. I know personally, when we're thrown into teaching online, there was an element of survival self kicking in. And that's where you're very much reactive, very impulsive, kind of bouncing off the walls and generally not being that productive. You're being more counterproductive. The third self, and this is the one that's, the one that kind of the ideal self, if you want, during times of crisis, is the adult self. And so the adult self, as you can probably guess, is the sort of centered, very calm, very focused individual who's very capable of kind of taking control of the situation, very soothing, very reassuring. And so if you can become much more aware of these 3 selves that influence our behavior in really difficult and challenging times, then what we can do is we can make a conscious effort to step into the adult self, and we can choose to sort of really address some of those negative emotions and focus on what we've got the power to influence, letting go of some of the rest. And so this is where I've suggested that actually emotional intelligence is one of the tools of the adult self. It's about understanding your own emotions. It's about being able to read other people's emotions, and also being able to discern, okay, if I'm thinking about, a particular way of interacting, what do I need to, in the face of this particular challenge, dial up on or dial down on? And that's where the idea of emotional intelligence really comes into play. The other thing to sort of just touch on, because this is a very brief overview, but it's worth just focusing on, is the idea of emotional contagion and why that's important when we think about emotions in the workplace, and especially during times of crisis. And so one of the things, I suppose, that it's one of the reasons that we understand now that it's important is because of this idea of emotional contagion. The idea that emotions are contagious, which is obviously quite topical at the moment. And so there's a lot of work that's been done on this, again, within our institution, but also more broadly, looking at the way that when our emotions are contagious, this can have implications for the workplace. There's a professor at Wharton Business School called Sigal Barsaid, who's written a lot on this. And the work that she's done, along with many other people, scientists and neuroscientists, looks at why it is that our emotions are contagious. And it's far beyond the remit of my understanding, because I'm not a neuroscientist. But what I do know at a very kind of simple level is that we have something called mirror neurons. We have these neurons in our brains, which are there specifically, because they're called mirror neurons, specifically there to mirror other people. We mimic other people, we pick up on their emotions, and then we emulate that. And so that's the way that we almost catch emotions, if you like. So why do we care about emotional contagion? Well, a couple of things. Well, one, we know that in times of challenge, like the pandemic, like with what's going on now, overwhelming emotions are things like fear and anxiety. It's various different negative emotions, if you like. And so such emotions obviously are just not enjoyable to actually be experiencing. But if we take that a step further and really understand the so what, so I'm a leader, I have a team, I bring my negative emotion into the team and that spreads. Why does that matter? The reason that matters is because a lot of research that's coming out now shows us the real implications of negative affect, negative mood on our productivity. And so one of the things that we know is that if, as somebody who has experienced a lot of negative mood and negative affect, it tends to do what's called narrowing our thought action repertoires. That's just a fancy way of saying it narrows our behavioral repertoire, if you like. And so one of the things that we know is if we see a threat in our environment and we react negatively, we have negative emotions in response to that, we're often narrowed down to the kind of fight or flight response. So the opposite of that, and this is again some work that's been looked at by various other people in other institutions. There's a woman called Barbara Fredrickson, for example, who has looked at this and has come up with what's called the broaden and build theory. But that really reflects the other side. So what we know that if we're experiencing much more positive emotion, much more positive affect, that broadens our thought action repertoires, that broadens the kinds of behaviors that we engage in. So things like creativity are linked to positive affect, positive emotions. Things like curiosity are much higher when we're experiencing positive emotions. We're much more willing to make social connections when we're in a positive frame of mind. And so all of these things are very much precursors to some of the things that we want to see in organizations, things like innovation, collaboration, team working, that kind of thing. And so from that perspective, thinking about emotional intelligence as a way that we can really start to think about how we express ourselves, express our emotions, how we react to other people, can have real implications for things like emotional contagion and ultimately our relationships with other people and the productivity of our teams and those sorts of things. So I guess the final thing I want to share with you today is this model of emotional intelligence. And the reason I've shared that with you is because this really forms the crux of the course that I'll be running in March, the Emotional Intelligence course. And there's lots of ways of understanding emotional intelligence. There's lots of competing theories around this. But this is the model that we use. And so this forms the basis of the feedback report that you'll get on that course, where we have one-to-one coaching sessions, but we also have group sessions where we start learning about what is emotional intelligence. As you'll see here, there's lots of different dimensions to it. And there's 5 different domains broadly. You've got yourself, the way you express yourself, how you interact with others, decision-making, and stress management, all of which have different dimensions underneath them. And when we think about emotional intelligence as a skill, it's those different dimensions under each of those domains that are really important, and which the course really focuses on. How can we focus on those 15 different subdimensions, those skills that allow us to either dial up or dial down certain facets, whether that's your self-regard, whether that's empathy, whether that's your impulse control. And so the idea is that through working with me, both on a one-to-one basis, but also with a group, that you'll basically come away understanding a lot more about where your emotional intelligence plays out on this particular model, and where and how, more importantly, we can dial up or dial down on those, or develop our various facets of emotional intelligence. So hopefully that gives you a very kind of whirlwind tour of emotional intelligence and some of the different elements of it and why it might be important, and just gives you a sense also of the course that we'll be running in March. So I will leave it there and hand back over to Kate.
Thanks, Ali. It's so interesting, all of this, I think, and I really enjoy hearing you talk about it, because I think, as exactly you say at the beginning, people think of emotions quite a one-dimensional concept, really, but it's so important, isn't it, to everything that we do. We do have plenty of time for questions today, so just a reminder to everyone, if you want to put any questions into the box as we go, either now or as we're continuing, please do. We're happy to answer everything that comes up, whether that's on Ali's material and the series around this, or whether that's just more generally around executive education. So keep them coming in, and we'll address those as we go through. So I guess Ali segued really nicely, if we go to the next slide, around the course that she's running in March, and she did a brilliant job of speaking about it, of course, because she is the director and knows exactly, but it is something that we wanted to mention today. So if the content that Ali's just talked about has resonated with you, and if you really do want to work on and hone your skills in emotional intelligence, and I think something that's very clear, as Ali said, is that this is not just a kind of a gift, or not everyone can think about these skills, then we are running the course starting on the 15th of March. We do have some spaces left, and registration is still open, so if you'd like more information from us about that course, or to find out more, please do contact us. We'd be happy to, and you can obviously find out more on our website as well. And as Ali said, and she mentioned before, it's a fantastic course in that you also get individual coaching with Ali as part of that, and the personalised report that will speak about your personality specifically in the emotional intelligence wheel that Ali used there. So it's a really nice way for you to kind of reflect and really understand yourself. And then also think about it in this wider concept. It will run over 3 half days, so it will all be virtual, so you can do it from wherever you are, and that will be happening through that week of 15th of March. So we've had a question come in. It's Elle White. Sorry, I don't know your first name. Hi, Ali. Can you say a few words about how the King's model is similar or different to Daniel Goleman's model?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I'll just go back a second and just sort of touch on this. So Daniel Goleman talks about 5 different dimensions as well, and his is slightly different. He talks about self-awareness and one's ability to sort of leverage that self-awareness. He talks about other awareness and kind of being having empathy and those sorts of things, and he talks about relationship management. And so this doesn't differ markedly from that, but the difference is that Daniel Goleman talks about it at a slightly more, I suppose, broad level, a bit more abstractly, if you like, whereas this model is really useful because, and this is why I tend to use this one, is because it breaks it down into much more actionable skills. So a lot of the things that he talks about will absolutely be encapsulated within this. So for example, self-awareness he talks about, but what we do here is we're actually be able to break down, okay, self-awareness with everything, with all of these things, but also self-awareness around, for example, self-regard. So what do I understand about my own strengths and weaknesses, and do I overemphasize one of those too much? Things around all of these. Am I too assertive? Am I not assertive enough? So the reason, as I say, why I use this is because it allows us to really drill down and make some kind of really sort of niche kind of tweaks, if you like, to understand where we can improve the way that we interact with other people and get the best out of ourselves, but also out of them.
Thanks, Ali. We've had a second question come in. So a question from Fatima. Hi, Ali, hope you're keeping well. I'm working as a corporate relationship manager in a bank. How is this course relevant for me?
The course is really relevant for anybody, and I probably didn't say this, but we've called it Emotional Intelligence for Leadership, which it absolutely is. And the course will touch on almost, what are some of the key leadership derailers? So things that you really want to nail if you're going to be a leader. But the sort of the underlying message is that emotional intelligence is for anybody that is a human. Basically, if you have to interact with other people, you will find that emotional intelligence, if you can get better at it, will enable you in that respect. It will enable you to sort of deal with the challenges as an individual, but also deal with challenges in terms of how you interact with other people. So Fatima, if you work with other people, then probably this would be useful for you.
I would imagine being a relationship manager, it sort of fits really nicely. Actually, it feels like a great fit. We'd love to welcome you, Fatima, if you're interested in the course. Do have a look and have a chat with us after if that would be helpful for you. And I think, that's just a point actually I'll pick up on more generally as well. As Ali said, and she put it perfectly, we have called it emotional intelligence for leaders, but actually, as we said earlier on, leading can be done in so many different ways, Ali, can't it? It's yes, there's the kind of the jobs that have leadership, the title, but there are so many other roles.
Yeah, and again, this is something that the course picks up on, and the idea that leadership is a title. Absolutely, you're leading, but we also have the initiative to lead ourselves, and often one of the ways that we do that is through being able to influence others. And emotional intelligence is key to being able to do that well, or do it at all. So yeah, absolutely.
Do keep questions coming if you want to. We'll happily go back. I think maybe in the meantime, if we move on. So we talked a little bit about the Emotional Intelligence for Leaders course, but I think actually that leadership question kind of segued us on nicely as well to doing our job for us with these questions. It's great. We also run a program that, as Ali said at the beginning, is one of our very popular programs, and we felt that it was really, really helpful to mention that here as well. So Ali co-directs the King's Leadership and People Management program. It's 4 days, and we do this course in person. Actually, we feel that's really important because it's a piece of the experience that we don't feel can be replicated virtually. So we're planning, and very much planning, to run our next cohort starting on the 24th of June. The announcements yesterday were very heartening in that sense from the UK government. So we will be running 2 cohorts of this program, actually June, and then we have another one running in November. And so it's 4 days in person with us, and as well as Ali and co-teachers. I think one of the really lovely, unique pieces of this program as well is that it has an in-depth experiential workshop with the Tavistock Institute, who are real experts in human relationships. So it very much picks up on what Ali said, but also has a kind of broader focus. And as Ali said at the beginning, this program, it will pick up on emotional intelligence, but it will also think about leadership and people management in a broader sense. And they're very complementary programs. So, if you're interested in the pair, that's definitely something that we wouldn't kind of dismiss. I think if you feel that both would be interesting, or you'd like to do one and the other, then that's something that we wanted to say here, was very much for people to understand that they're quite complementary, and each piece will build on the other. I don't know, Ali, if there's anything you want to add to that about it.
Definitely. Just to say a little bit more about the Leadership and People Management program. To give you a sort of flavor of what it looks like, it's a combination of things. So you've mentioned the simulation, which is a really kind of unique part of that course, which is something that I think a lot of people slightly dread, but end up really getting a lot out of, because you're actually inhabiting a role and doing some of this experiential work, which really ties in nicely to some of the stuff that you're doing on the previous day. So we try and get you to apply some of the things that we're talking about in the days that precede that. But it's a mixture of things. It's lectures. We bring in external speakers to come and talk about their experiences of leadership from a variety of different contexts. We use small group exercises, reflective practice, and this is something both within this course and the emotional intelligence course. Reflective practice is a really key pillar of it, because what we want you to be able to do is to apply some of this work to your own situation, so that you go away feeling like you've got something solid from this course, and you can see how it's relevant to the work that you're doing outside of the course. And so the course itself as you said, it's 4 days, but sort of the first 3.5 days is in person, and kind of standard course, and then the last day you come back, and you'll present something back. And so that's where we work with you over the summer, if it's the June one, or later if it's the November one, to really bring to life some of the course with a key issue that you're facing in your own organization, in your own leadership journey. But yeah, I think that's everything.
That sounds pretty good to me. Thank you. And I think just to add as well on this, I hope this would go without saying, but we as a university, we are obviously doing a lot virtually at the moment, but when we are doing in-person teaching, and we have been doing that throughout the year where it's been possible, we're obviously totally COVID safe. So we've got really, really good protocols and setup and arrangements so that, if we are bringing people together in person, we'll do that really safely. And it's really nice, actually. It's not a big group of people, we're kind of looking at 20 to 25 people in a group, so it's you get a lot of attention in a good way, and it's that really facilitates that piece around taking part in the workshops and stuff. But also just wanted to obviously say to everyone, to reassure you that where we are doing in-person activities, it will be super well managed, as I'm sure you would hopefully assume from us. Just, I guess, moving slightly away from leadership and people management to more broadly, I also wanted to take this opportunity to share what else we do at King's. Much of what we do actually is linked together. So I think we have a number of people who will take a combination of courses because they are designed to fit together and be useful. And they're very much designed to help people with this kind of transition phase. You might have been working in a space or a career stage or a team that's quite focused, and then now you're really starting to have to broaden that experience out. And so the idea around a lot of our suite of courses is that it helps you do that. This is just a brief kind of show and tell of what we've got coming up in the next few months. All of these courses on this slide here are running virtually. And we're well practiced at that. We have a fantastic online team here actually as well, which is really helpful. So we've got some brilliant courses that have been transposed into those settings. So strategic management and governance is starting in April, along with strategic marketing management. And again, both of those are sort of the idea behind them is that, you don't need to necessarily be a marketing expert, but if you're going to progress within an organization and work well with other parts of the business, or albeit, set up your own business, you do need to understand how that stuff works to be a capable professional. And so that's the idea around those. Mini MBA for in-house lawyers is a new course that we've just launched. We're really proud of that one, actually. It's obviously King's has a great reputation for law, and we're now partnering kind of with the law department and the Association for Corporate Counsel to create that course. And again, the idea is that, lawyers are fantastic and they know the law, but there is a point in your career where actually knowing more about the business and being that really helpful business partner is what will help you in your professional development. And it's exactly the same ethos there. And then finance for strategic impact. So again, along with the kind of marketing and strategic management idea, the idea here is that, there is a point in your career where you have to understand finance. And again, you don't have to be the finance or accounting person, but you're going to need to know these things. And really, actually, I think there's something here around confidence. I think finance is one of those areas of businesses in particular where it can be somewhat terrifying, I think, for people. You feel like you can get through your career to a certain point, kind of knowing what's going on, but having those discussions around important tables and asking the right questions can really be a kind of confidence challenge, I think, for people. And so the purpose of this course is to help you get really comfortable with that and know what questions to ask, know how to work with your finance people, understand balance sheets, and be able to kind of hold your own in those discussions and really feel like you've got a good understanding of the business. So that's what we've got coming up. Again, as I've said before, we'd be more than happy to chat to people about those courses as they come. And then just one final piece from me was just another new activity that I wanted to tell you about, which was our executive masterclasses. So again, these are new this year and we're really excited about them. As everyone's been noticing, kind of COVID's been quite fun in a sense because it's helped us to try new activities as well as some of the ones we already had established. And so we've developed this suite of new 3-hour virtual workshops. So the idea here again is, it's 3 hours in a day. Hopefully most people can find that. And it's in our virtual classroom. So kind of, still very interactive. The idea is that it's a smallish group and you'll still have lots of time chatting with the course leader, but also with the other participants. But they are very topic focused, and you can see that we've really focused them in on what we think are some of the current challenges that we're hearing people are dealing with at the moment. So crisis communication is quite popular, as you would expect. influence in negotiating. Clearly there's parallels there as well with emotional intelligence, but it's kind of focusing in on that influencing and negotiating specific piece. Managing strategic change. I think constantly we're in change at the moment, so that one's also proving very interesting. Quick note on social entrepreneurship as well. So you'll notice that's intrapreneur and not entrepreneur, and it would be fitting for both, but actually we were really keen to do something about social entrepreneurship, because this is about being entrepreneurial within your role or business that you're in. So we have two courses here on this one. Becoming a social entrepreneur is for an individual. So if you're in a role and you think, I'd love to do some more kind of socially minded entrepreneurial activities, I don't know how to start going about that with my business. Do they even want that? That session will focus a lot on what you can do, but also how you can bring people along and actually the benefits that you can bring to your organization by doing that. Enabling social entrepreneurship is from the other side. So if you're a business and you want your teams and your employees to be a bit more socially entrepreneurial, then the focus of that session is more around how you can help kind of blossom those skills and pieces within people there as well. So just to give an explainer there. We've got all of these are up on our website. So again, we'll be adding new topics and adding new sessions as this whole 2021 goes through. So do keep an eye. We'd love to see you at those. And just as before, we've got discounts for alumni as well, if that's something that you qualify for. So we'd love to welcome you back. When I say alumni as well, I do mean King's degree alumni, but also if you've done a course with King's Business School before, an executive education course, we're very happy to extend that discount there as well. So it'd be wonderful to see you there. So I will stop, I think. If we just pop to the end, I guess the final message we wanted to leave you with was, I hope you found today really informative and been inspired by Ali to think about your emotional intelligence and how you might develop that. We still have a bit of time for questions if anyone wants to pop anything in. And we'd obviously very much like to see you on a screen or meet you in person one day at King's Business School. So I hope if anything that has resonated for you today, you'll reach out to us. We're very, very, very happy to have informal discussions with you. So if you think that there's something here, and kind of a bit like Fatima's question, but you're just not sure how it might fit with your role or what your kind of larger kind of career plans are, please do talk to us around that, and we'd be happy to kind of have an informal chat. We're very experienced in this space. I'm just looking at my other screen, sorry. Note from Sarah. Oh yes, good question, Sarah. Actually, the deadline for applying to the emotional intelligence course. So the course starts on the 15th of March, as you will have noticed. And I have to say, I have to double check the application date. Isn't that terrible? The 8th of March. So we do still have some spaces remaining. So I very much hope that will be of interest. The application process is very straightforward. You can do it straight through the website. And yeah, it's really easy. We'll just ask you for some information and just double check that the course is a good fit for you. Likewise, if you want to talk with a human, with Sarah or one of the others of us beforehand, then you can also just reach out to us and we'll be happy to do that and then point you to the piece. Sarah, you've appeared. Would you like to add anything that I've missed, or have I got it covered?
That sounds great to me. It was just to really put a human face for the people that I've been talking to by email over the past couple of months and past week, and be really pleased if anybody wants to have a more general chat about the kind of course they might be looking for. And as Kate has done today, I can kind of run through in more details and the kind of options that might suit what you're looking for, really, either for yourself or for your teams, or if you're looking to source some leadership development for your people or your colleagues. It would be great to hear from you.
Sarah's super experienced. She's wonderful. So she has guided lots of people through this process, and we'll obviously be in touch with everyone afterwards as well to share kind of more about what we spoke about today. Just double check. We have a question actually, just double checking we're not going to miss any questions. Can international students join this course? So, the answer is yes, anything that we run virtually. If you can be online at the time of the sessions, I think we've kind of scheduled everything at times that we hope will capture people, you're absolutely welcome to join. Just a point that, the courses will be taught in English. So obviously you need to just be confident enough that you've got the English that you feel comfortable in that. We don't have a language requirement per se necessarily, but we do just once, if you're working and and conversing in English on a general basis, then that's great. You'll be the right level there. But yeah, absolutely, we welcome people from other areas, and we'd be very happy to have an international cohort. We often do. Obviously, historically, it meant that people would fly in, which we very much enjoyed, and we'd love to do that again in future. But actually, again, one of the kind of nice things at the moment is that in doing virtual courses, we are finding that we're welcoming really international cohorts, which is great. And I think it's it's a great experience for you guys and for each other, and also for Ali and the course directors. I think it really broadens the experience for everyone. So it will say really clearly on the website what the script structure is for a program, and we just ask you just to check that you can attend. We've had people from Australia and all sorts, tagging it on to the end of their working day or doing a lesson with us before they go into their office. And we'd be very happy to join you there, to see you there. I'll just pause just for a moment, just to double check there aren't any additional questions going to come in. I just don't want to miss anything. But I think we seem to be wrapping up. As I've said, anything else, please feel free to contact us. And we really look forward to welcoming you to King's Business School, whether that's virtually or in person or both at some point in the next year or so. We're really looking forward to it. So we'll stop the webinar there, I think. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ali. Huge thanks and round of applause. And we'll hope to see everyone soon.